Here with you on the line with us is our old friend, Professor Richard Wolff.
Oh, wow. Thom, Hartmann, and Richard Wolff. Everyone, set your bogon shields to maximum.
Most recent book, Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown.
Of course he's hawking a new book.
Donald Trump has been going after the Fed.
He has? Well, maybe he isn't so bad after all.
This is something that traditionally presidents don't do. Long after Lyndon Johnson died, we learned that, I believe his Fed chief's name was Miller.
Bill Martin was the Fed chair under LBJ. Does this guy ever get anything right? I mean, he's even going from prepared comments here.
And he had this guy into the White House, and he was concerned that interest rates were going up, and he didn't want that happening. Literally grabbed him by the shirt collar, slammed him up against the wall, lifted him off his, up on his tippy toes, and threatened him. And Miller still said, "Screw you" to LBJ, or words to that effect, and went ahead and raised interest rates.
And that was good, just like Volcker raising interest rates in 1981 was good. Only difference is Reagan understood enough economics that he didn't fight him on it. The fight with LBJ was also about the hideous increase in spending that accompanied the Great Society policies, as well as spending on the Vietnam War, most of which wasn't being reported. See, interest rates need to go up in order to increase the savings rate, which is where real investment money comes from. Without it, all the Fed can do is inflate the currency, which might make things look good in the short term, but it just creates yet another bubble that will inevitably pop.
Trump seems to be trying to threaten the current Fed chief.
No, he's not. He's criticizing him.
That he himself appointed.
Wow, so a president is willing to criticize his own appointee, and you think that's somehow a bad thing?
And I'm wondering what this means. Where can he go with this? What kind of damage can this do?
Not anywhere near as much damage as if we have another financial bubble and it pops.
Why does Trump even care?
Really?
And how, in all probability, will the Fed respond? I mean, I noticed today, after this reporting went out last night about this, that today that foreign currencies are up, the dollar's down, gold is up, all things that would tend to indicate that they expect that the Fed is going to back down.
There was a small uptick in the gold market after months of decline. That uptick didn't last, and it plateaued quickly. Gotta love how these people take every tiny little blip in the market as evidence that they're right. Kinda like when Sam Seder tried to debunk the disemployment effects of minimum wage by looking at just 2 months. Geez, could you imagine Seder, Hartmann, and Wolff all together at the same time? The universe would implode from the critical mass of idiocy.
Starting in 2000 when the dot-com bubble burst, and then again in 2008 when the mortgage crisis took us over the edge, the response of the Federal Reserve in the United States, and indeed of central banks around the world, was not to get us out of this capitalist crash.
It's not a capitalist crash, Wolff. You've been caught making this lie several times. It's because the Fed kept pumping too much money into these markets.
By what's called monetary policy. And the central component of monetary policy is to reduce interest rates to virtually zero, which was done.
And which is the problem?
Indeed, in some cases, the interest rates went below zero.
And this is to flood the system with cheap money, right?
Exactly.
If interest rates are up, then people save, and that money is used for investments. When the Fed lowers interest rates, it does so by artificially increasing the supply of loanable funds, pumping in money that didn't exist before. The difference is when people invest, they're deferring consumption of resources they could have used that money to consume until the investment pays off. That means they're not using those resources, and so whoever gets the investment money can take advantage of those resources. But when the Fed pumps in money, it's not tied to any resources. People are still consuming as much as they are, and those who receive the investments are using additional resources that aren't really there. It's an illusion. That's what drove the housing bubble. It made it look like there were more resources in the housing market than there really were, and therefore made it look like there was more demand for housing than there really was. There is nothing controversial about what I'm saying. You can read this in any macroeconomics textbook. No school of economics denies this. But when you're an anti-capitalist and your own policies fail, you have to try and blame capitalism somehow.
The problem, of course, when you do that is that at some point, all of that extra money may come back and start to be nervous about holding, people who have it, nervous about holding money, because if prices start to go up, then the value of any money you hold correspondingly goes down.
That's not what it's about. It happens when people start to realize that the resources they've been depending on aren't really there. That's why the prices start to rise to begin with. This is a bit like saying disease is the result of people being nervous about getting a fever. But they get the fever for a reason. If your temperature goes up, it means there's something wrong with your body. If prices go up, it means there's something wrong in the market, and it's a signal for market players to get out of that industry and do something different with their money, someplace in the economy that really could use the resources.
So the great fear of this way of dealing with capitalist instability...
Stop saying capitalist! Central banks aren't capitalist! In fact, they're part of your hero Marxist platform detailed in the Communist Manifesto.
Once people see prices rising, they will run to unload their money into something more secure.
Which is where the money should have been going to begin with.
And that, of course, will make the problem worse.
No, that's how you fix the problem. End the malinvestment and let people put their money where it's really needed. All you have to do to achieve that is to let the price mechanism work.
That's what the Federal Reserve decided over the last year and a half to do. Slowly, modestly raise interest rates so as to keep this monster of inflation that's a serious problem.
Funny how under Obama you were saying this was a good thing, and that was with 3 rounds of quantitative easing. Now, all of a sudden, under Trump, you're reversing the very policy you've been espousing for years.
When you raise interest rates, you slow down the economy.
Short term, because it takes a bit for resources to properly shift around to where they're needed. But once that short-term recession is over, growth picks up. And overall, you get far more growth than if you try just kicking the can down the road some more, which again is exactly what Wolff was advocating the whole time Obama was in power. And it was those horrible, greedy capitalists and libertarians and Austrian economists who wanted interest rates to rise, and that's horrible and would destroy the economy. Is anyone going to take any bets that Wolff is going to just come out and say that the Austrians were right all along? Personally, I'm not holding my breath on that.
But if I'm the chairman of the Fed, I'm looking at the Republican Party and Donald Trump flooding $1.5 trillion borrowed dollars into the economy.
Funny how you haven't been against that until now either. In fact, you were mocking people who were pointing out how horrible it is that we've run up a $21 trillion national debt, and how horrible it was when Republicans didn't want to increase the debt ceiling.
Over $1 trillion of it has, or about $1 trillion of it has been used for share buybacks. So it's mostly just fattening the wallet of the top 1% or less than the top 1%.
When done by someone with an R next to his name, when Democrats do it, it's necessary for the economy, and the greedy capitalists only want to stop it to benefit the top 1%. The laws of economics don't change based on who's in power, Hartmann.
You have been pumping the economy up with more money. And then last December, you gave businesses and rich people a stupefyingly large tax cut, which they are now spending and using to buy back shares, to boost their dividends, and so on.
And this is a problem. Why? They're paying off investment debt.
Both in fiscal policy with the tax cut.
The tax cut only affected taxes that did not represent revenues the government was getting, because companies were moving elsewhere to more business-friendly countries like Ireland. The tax cut is resulting in those companies coming back, and so revenues should actually go up, because you get more money when people pay a small percentage of whatever than when they pay a larger percentage of zero. This is the problem with quack economists like Wolff. They look at the economy in kindergarten terms and don't understand concepts like opportunity costs or unintended consequences. Just reading through Hazlitt's economics in one lesson will set this straight. Don't just assume it's going to have the effect that you want. Look at all of the effects and see what's happening overall. Going to Wolff for advice on the economy is like going to a quack doctor for your fever, and he just gives you Tylenol to get the fever down. And then you die of the plague because he didn't give you the antibiotics to cure the real problem.
So it doesn't look like the Fed is simply caving in the face of it. And maybe that won't be enough for Mr. Trump, and he'll shuffle the Fed Reserve chairman as fast as he's shuffled his cabinet appointees.
Trump doesn't have the power to do that. The Fed answers to Congress, not the president. The president just appoints the chair to a 4-year term, and the Senate approves it. He won't be able to replace Powell until his term is up in 2022. It works the same way with the Board of Governors, except they're appointed to 14-year terms. And although a Fed chair can be removed for cause, the Supreme Court decision Humphreys Executor v. United States said that the president cannot just fire an officer of a quasi-legislative, quasi-judicial administrative body created by Congress for purely political reasons without the consent of Congress and without following procedures previously established by legislation. Trump cannot just fire Powell like he can a cabinet member.
So, the end will come. I mean, this is the cyclical nature of capitalism.
This isn't capitalism! Capitalists are against the Fed and central banks! Central banks were advocated by your boy Marx!
Yes, normally the whole logic of the money management is that you raise the rates when the economy is in good shape, so to speak, and doing reasonably well, so that you can lower it when the economy, as you say, predictably with its cycles goes down.
Except this really isn't logic, is it? This is assuming that the Federal Reserve is governed by priests with a direct hotline to God to get divine revelation, or by wizards with their crystal balls or something. The economic calculation problem means that they cannot get the information as to where interest rates should be at any given time. You need the price mechanism to do that. The market should manage interest rates, setting them at whatever the equilibrium is at the current moment. The point where you have people willing to put up the same number of dollars for investment as you have dollars people are wanting to borrow. That way, you don't have anything to worry about as far as inflation and financial bubbles are concerned. That is the point that both Donald Trump and you morons fail to understand. You all see this in simplistic terms, like a dial you can just move up or down as you need, instead of an incredibly complex system of emergent order from the chaos of 330 million individuals making their own decisions every single day. Do you even have the capacity to understand that?
We're already so far into it that businesses are cutting back. There's no point in hiring workers now, expanding capacity to produce, if you're looking at a crash.
Except they are hiring workers and they are expanding capacity. In fact, the civilian unemployment rate has dropped lower than it was at any point during the Obama administration. And real output per hour increased 3.6% in the second quarter of 2018 compared to 0.6% in the first quarter and negative 1.1% in the fourth quarter of 2017. In fact, 3.6% is a higher rate than seen at any time in the post-recession Obama era.
That's one of the crazinesses of a capitalist system, that the way it makes for rational decision-making brings about the very thing that makes the system unstable in the first place.
The thing that makes the system unstable is morons like you and Trump thinking the government can somehow manage it. How come every time government takes a hands-off approach, the economy recovers in less than a year and a half? Look at 1921. Look at 1946. How come you people never want to talk about that? Hey, if you enjoyed this video, why not hit like and subscribe? And to make sure I can produce more, support this channel on Patreon and Maker Support. And check out all the other great content here, like this video selected especially for you.